Just your impressions of the market movements today?
Well, it's a pleasure to be here today. Well, I must say, if you notice, there's not much activity except for one or two counters. The market dropped by 0.23 points. You notice it dropped from the last week's performance. But except for a few counters, notably Safaricom, Coop Bank, that traded heavily within their sectors.
Right. Obviously, the markets were calmer in the last week following the rights issue at KCB. Many analysts just taking a wait-and-see approach. Now, KCB is trying to raise 15 billion shillings for expansion. What are the subscription levels like at the moment?
Well, like you mentioned, there's still been a little bit of interest here and there. There's not been much generated from it, but then again, we look at the period for the rights issue and more awareness is being created. So give or take, in the next couple of weeks, we'll see some significant change in those who are taking up that rights issue.
Let's talk about the rights issue and its importance for KCB. They're looking for a sale of 887 million shares at a discounted price of 17 shillings. Investors are very concerned that it's going to create some sort of a price volatility for KCB as a stock. Your views?
Well, you have to look at it in the sense that KCB is actually listed in the Ugandan Stock Exchange, so more or less not just in the Kenyan Stock Exchange. And then also their long-term plan is they're trying to become more or less like a Pan-American bank, hence expansion. They've already had a foothold within the East African region. If you notice, they have a branch in Rwanda, they're in Tanzania, they're in Uganda, they're in Sudan, they're in Kenya, which is their parent place, and now they're looking at expanding. And with that, you notice that expansion also calls for a lot in terms of how you venture into other markets. So more often than not, the rights issue will also create enough pool of funds to lend out money and also part of their visionary expansion plans.
There is a fear, though, Waiyaki, that the shareholding is going to swell from 2.2 billion to 3 billion, and effectively this is going to dilute the earnings of KCB, and it's going to have a very negative effect on the smaller investors. Do you agree with that sentiment?
Well, I have to look at it from that point of view and say, yes, it is. It will dilute in terms of earnings. But look at it, most investors are also being given a chance to buy because the current share price is actually very much affordable through the rights issue. At 17 shillings, it means just about any individual will be able to come on board and take part in that rights issue. But regarding the expansion and diluting the shareholders, well, you'd have to look at it, what would be the long-term benefit in terms of holding that share.
Right. Let's talk about TPS Serena. They've now gained regulatory approval to issue 17.6 million bonus shares. They also have plans to raise 1.2 billion shillings through a rights issue later on this year. Why are they going this route?
Well, it's more or less expansion programs. They need to have funds sufficient to set up the expansion. And one of the key reasons I have to go about this is that going with what we've seen with the World Cup and the amount of people who've come in, first-time travelers to Africa, and they've gotten a different view of Africa because of the superb hosting that has happened in South Africa. There'll be a knock-on effect within the next 2-3 years of repeat tourists coming into Africa. And what Serena is looking at, if you notice, like also purchasing some of the hotels and also doing renovations and setting up new camps. It's almost like preparing for that influx of tourists who will come in within the next couple of years, 1 or 2 years.
Obviously, so you're speaking to the fact that their program is to acquire 51% of Upkey Lodge in Tanzania and also refurbish others in Rwanda. Talk to us about Cooperative Bank, renewed interest in the bank. Why is that?
Well, I had mentioned a while back about Cooperative Bank and the model that it's adopting. And I feel investors are actually looking to it and realize it's actually first and foremost the price at which the share is very optimal as an entry point. Then as a business model, it has a very superb business model because first and foremost, it has a lot of the cooperative movement, and then it has Kingdom Securities, which is a stockbroking arm, but also their banking. They're now emerging as one of the big banks within Kenya. And in terms of stability, in terms of market outreach, they're actually now gunning up to be as part of the big boys. So more or less, investors are actually looking at this as a prime time to come on board and buy into the cooperative bank.